Okay, so let's introduce Angular, and let's introduce it by building a client-side application that consumes data that we already worked on for the last couple of weeks, right? So we already have data for representing courses and modules and topics and lessons. So that's what we already have, and we understand very well. We know the data model behind it, the data structure. So that you can reuse a lot of what you already know about how that data is structured. We're just going to build a consumer of that data, right? We already looked at how to do it using React, and but in that part we focus on more on the faculty's, from the faculty's point of view, being able to create that data, right? We used forms and to be able to add new courses, new topics, new lessons, new widgets. And we did that using React. So now we're focusing more on building a client-side application, but what a student might see or what they might use. So they would be a consumer of that data, right? They probably hit the same exact API for retrieving the courses, and then once it's able to retrieve that data, render it for a student. Okay. Now we give you one possible solution for doing this here in the slides. Right. This walks you, handholds you to building one of these Angular applications. But the same issues come up when we were using React, that we were faced with two options, right? Two architectures of doing this. One of them was, download the entire object, right? Edit it, and then maybe post the entire object for saving, right? And so that we did that with the widgets. Yes, we built an array of widgets. And we would edit everything on the client, and then once we were done, we would click save and would send the entire data set to the server to be saved, right? So that's certainly one way of doing it. The other way of doing it that is proposed in the slides was to do it piecemeal, right? Where when you add a brand new widget, you go off and save it right away to the server, right? And so that you minimize the time where the client might be showing something that is stale, right? That's perhaps, and this is important, especially if you have multi-users, right? Editing the same data model, data set, where I want to make sure that I always see the latest. So same thing. Obviously, that kind of decision always was going to be with us. Which way do we go? And it depends again if it's just you. Editing something, or if you can have multiple users editing at the same time and whatnot, and then how do you deal with versions and people overwriting each other? So that certainly those are challenges. So these slides walk you through the piecemeal, right? I'm consuming the data as I need it, right? So I want to look at the courses, and I see the list of courses. When I select a particular course, then I go and fetch the modules for that course, and I show those modules. Once I select a module, I can then go and fetch the lessons for that module. And once I select the lesson, I can go fetch the topics, and so on and so forth. Right? I can drill down and piecemeal fetch what I need, just in time. So that's certainly one way of doing it. The other alternative is that, well, I could download the entire thing, right? And the course containing the modules, module containing the lessons, lesson containing the topics, topics containing the widgets. I can download the entire thing over to my client and just render that, right? Now the problem with this particular approach is that, well, you might not need all that, right? And you fetch all this data that you never even used, right? But certainly makes it easier to build, though, right? So I just want to point out the ease of building it. So let's tackle that in class. I just want to point that out. The slides walk you through the piecemeal, right? Of fetching one thing at a time, go and fetch another thing, right? And as you need it, as just in time, as opposed to rendering the whole thing. right? Again, both work well, right? Both have pros and cons. So I just wanted to make you aware of those two choices. The data model that we've been using all along throughout the semester is the same exact data model, right? We have courses containing many modules, modules containing many lessons. If you're a graduate, you have probably lessons containing many topics, and a topic containing many widgets. Okay? If you're undergrad, you just go up down to lessons. Right? So let's build a navigator, because basically a navigator that would allow us to navigate this data set, because basically that's what the assignment asks you to do, right? Once you select a course, right, and then the student would like to be able to navigate through that course by selecting their module, selecting the lesson, selecting the topic, and depending which tab or pill or sidebar element they choose, right, you would display the different subset of the data set. So I'll build this generic one which doesn't have exactly the same layout that you're asked to build, but the only real difference here is the layout, right? It's the same implementation. In the assignment, you're asked to do a list on the left-hand side, tabs at the top, and pills down below, right? Widgets. We'll build it a little bit different, right? So the layout will be different. It'll also make it easier to present in a didactic sense. Okay. All right. So let's start. Yes.
Trying to understand how this is going to look with regards to. So this is the student side.
Yeah. The student will be able to select a course, right? And then as they select a particular course, then they'll see the modules in that particular module. And as they select the module, they'll be able to see the lessons in that module, and so on and so forth. So it's a drill down from left to right. In your assignment, you're asked to, modules, render them on the left-hand side, the lessons, render them at the top, the pills down below, and then the widgets as a list under there, right? And you drill down from left to top to down. So it's obviously a different layout, right? This is a much simpler layout, but it's the same data set. Okay. Okay. So let's get started by first creating the project. Right. When last time we met, we built a Hello World application. So let's start with the application that we'll need to create. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? So this is the React. So let's go up one in the lecture. So notice that we have the Java server. That's going to use the same exact Java server, right? That's hosting the courses, the modules, the lessons. That's the same Java server we've been playing around with for the last couple of weeks. The React client, that's still what the faculty would use. Okay, that the faculty would still use the same React client, and we'll build the student client, but we'll use Angular. Right? No particular reason. Right? We can still be using React, yes. But again, this will give us a chance to look at other view architecture or client-side app architectures. All right. So to create a brand new project, we use ng. Right? We installed ng last week. It's the Angular command line interface. New to create a brand new project, and we'll use the same naming convention as we've been using. So webdev -summer2 2018. It's a client. It's Angular and Januzzi. I think this might be too long though. Yeah, it's complaining that's way too long. Must start with let's start with the letter alphanumeric. Angular, is that okay? No, probably doesn't like dashes either. Can I put Januzzi? No. WebDev Angular. No. Oh my goodness. A project starting with a letter and must contain only alphanumeric or dashes. Oh, you want that? You're okay with dashes? There we go. Okay, so obviously the name that this is a local project name, right? You can, when you deploy it, you can deploy it anywhere you want on Git, right? You can give it a name. Please follow the same naming convention for the Git repository so that we know it's this semester, and also the username to identify yourself. All right, so that's installing the Angular project. This is the boilerplate project, and we can go in there and start it either using npm start, just like we start the React application, or we can use ng. Is it ng serve -- open? No. Oh, apparently I already have something running at 4200. This might be it. So this is starting. It started a local Node.js server, and it's hosting our boilerplate Angular application. It'll start with the boilerplate minimal hello world application. Everything okay? All right, so let's open that with WebStorm or your favorite IDE. Let's close that, and let's open up Open. And let's see, we have it under webdev, the 14th, and then this is lectures, and there it is, webdev Angular. Let's open that up. Okay, and the starting point, as we mentioned earlier, is this app right here, right? This is the HTML we're looking at right now. That's the component. This is the TypeScript that goes behind that. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. It's a better JavaScript. It's a superset in that JavaScript itself is considered to be valid TypeScript. Right? It's an extension of the language that adds things such as classes, modules, injection, all sorts of really nice constructors, all things that you would expect of fully blown object-oriented languages, right? So that's the language that we'll be using from now on. What the compiler, what Angular does is that just like in React, it transpiles this TypeScript language down to a common low-level JavaScript that all browsers can understand, right? Because browsers can't yet parse or make sense out of TypeScript. Right? They can only just understand JavaScript. So it compiles this down to JavaScript that can be understood by current browsers. Eventually, browsers will be able to understand these other languages in a bit, but for now, they need to be transpiled down to JavaScript, right? So just like React, the minimum or the smallest piece of data that can be represented in on a web page is referred to as a component. Right? The whole thing revolves around being able to break up the application into multiple components that can then be built up to build more complex components. Okay. In React, we would do that by creating a class and extending React.component, right? And here's something similar, but it has a different syntax. Basically, it's just a class, just like in React, but instead of extending a component class, we use annotations. Annotations is an idea that was borrowed from server-side applications that have been solving server-side applications for forever, for decades, right? That Java and .NET and all these very mature frameworks have been using these ideas, and as client-side applications have ballooned in complexity, they have started to borrow a lot of these ideas. Said, well, these work very well in large-scale Java or .NET applications, well, let's borrow some of the same ideas now that we're also building very complex client-side applications. So things such as annotations are now very common in client-side frameworks. Injection, we'll see in a minute, being able to inject, leave the life cycle management of objects to a framework as opposed to you instantiating things. You leave it up to, look very, very much like in Java. We'll see that in a minute. Anyway, so this is the root component. Right? This is the root component. And the only thing that it's doing is that it's declaring in the selector, it's declaring the name of the tag, right? The name of the tag. Okay, so if you want to be able to render this, you would use the tag open pointy brackets app dash root and then close the tag. Right, so this declares the name of the tag. It's a little less intuitive as you would do it in React. Right? In React, maybe you just say that you name the class, and that's the name of the tag. Right? There's a one-to-one mapping between them. Here, you can name the class one thing, but you can declare what you want the tag to be separately. Right? They don't have to match. The name of the class doesn't have to match the actual tag name. Right? The other thing here is that instead of embedding the HTML within your JavaScript, instead you can configure where the HTML lives. You can say, well, the HTML is this other HTML page over there. Okay? You could instead declare the HTML right here, and you can you can escape characters and put your HTML here. Hello, you could do that, right? Although this is very uncommon. Right? This is very, very uncommon. It's typically it's frowned upon when we're mixing and matching both HTML and JavaScript. Right? Although React made it very common and very comfortable, right, to be able to embed these two things, but it's commonly frowned upon. Instead, it's much more common that you give a URL to the location of an HTML page, right, and the HTML lives over there, right? So Angular promotes this division of concerns and says, no, the logic lives here and the rendering lives over there, right? And we have very, very well defined roles here, right? Here the component generates the data, right, and then sends it over the wall to be rendered, right? But there's no mix of concerns here, right? The rendering should not care about how to calculate anything, right? How to data represent anything, right? Whereas the component, that's the responsibility of the component. The other here, we could also declare styles that would be only specific to this one page, right? So you could style down to this one page. Typical component is made up of these 4 files, of a CSS file, an HTML file, a spec file, that's for testing purposes, and a TS file. That makes up a component. Right? Those 4 files make a component. And this is the root component. This is the root component. Okay? Everybody good? All right, awesome. All right, so let's build our own component. Let's build our own component. Let's first let's see, in the same tab, we can create a brand new component. Let's create a whiteboard component. So what the student might see. All right? So let's see. To create a brand new component from the root of your application, you can do an ng for Angular. There's the CLI, and you can say generate, G for generate, or you can spell it out. You can say generate. C for component. You can spell it out. So you can say ng generate a component, right? And the name of the component that you want to generate. Right? And what we'll do is it'll build these four files for you, a directory with that name of the component, and then those 4 files under there. Right? So we'll create here whiteboard. Okay. So it builds it under a directory called whiteboard, and it creates those 4 files. Everybody good? Okay. So there it is, a directory that with our component in there. Excellent. All right. The other thing that it does is that it also declares it here in the app.module. App.module is like the center of configuration. It configures and sets up the project. Right? It loads all the components, right? It declares them what they're supposed to be. For instance, it's declaring all the components. Here are your components. Right? There's the root component, and also our brand new whiteboard component is being declared here. Otherwise, you would have to do it by hand, right? And it also says it declares which is the root component in this case. Right? You can override it and say whiteboard is my root component, and that'd be fine. Okay? What else does it do? It also imports other things such as other modules that we would need. Perhaps the browser module we mentioned. This is so that Angular can extend to other, beyond the browser, right? For instance, here we could load something. There's a native module, right? Then you can target different client types, right? Not just the browser. And later on, we'll see providers. It will allow us to declare data providers, right? Where are we getting the data from, right? In this particular case, we'd like to get them from data source over in a in a web service, right? So we'll do that in a minute. All right, excellent. So this is kind of like our Bootstrap. Bootstrap and everything. You'll be here very seldom. You'll be here, but from time to time we'll have to come back in here and tweak a couple of things, right? But it's very infrequent that you'll be in here. Okay? You'll spend most of your time building your components. Okay. All right. So let's look at the whiteboard component we just built. We just generated. It's pretty much empty. It has it declares it as a class, right? And uses the naming convention that dashes and lowercase are substituted with a capital letter. So whiteboard, the dash is notice the B is now capital. Also, it adds at the end the keyword component. But really what it makes it a component is that it has been annotated as a component. Okay? Right. Also notice the selector. So that's the tag, right? And so that's the tag that it's going to be using, right? By default, it prepends everything with app dash. You can configure that to be something else. Typically, this might be some acronym that might make sense in your place of work, right? Maybe for this might be MIT or NEU or whatever acronym that might differentiate your components versus somebody else's components, right? That might have the same naming convention, right? Also, it declares the HTML, CSS that go along with this. In the HTML, there's nothing in it. It's just just a paragraph. There's nothing in it much there. Also, it declares a constructor. This is an optional constructor that's not doing anything. And it implements, notice it implements an interface, right? Something new in JavaScript, right? It implements an interface. Again, that's TypeScript. TypeScript is adding those ideas. This interface is an on-init, which very much like React, there's lifecycle methods, right, that get called, right, at certain points, right, when the component is being instantiated, right when it's ready to be rendered on the DOM. So this on-init gets called right before it's ready to be rendered, right? And so this is a good place for you to, maybe go fetch some data to the server and maybe store it in local variables, and so that they can be rendered on the client side. Everybody okay? All right, so let's render this. Right now, we just have this boring welcome page. So let's and that's here in the root component, right? So we'll just throw this away. We don't really need that. And doing that, notice that now we have a blank page rendering. Anything we render here, anything we say here, right, H1 welcome to webdev, right? It will be transpiled and converted and re-rendered. But what we want to do here is basically render that component we just built. So that's whiteboard. There it is, app whiteboard. And that's a tag we just generated. And we want to render the app whiteboard. And in that whiteboard, the only thing we have there is whiteboard works, right? That paragraph, well, that's the only thing that is being rendered here. Yes? So basically we're now where we want to be, right, inside our whiteboard component, and then just focus on what we want to put in there. Okay, so let's focus now on what is it that we want to put in our whiteboard. All right, so let's go into our whiteboard, and in here we can say H1, welcome to whiteboard. Okay, everybody good? All right, so let's see what else would what we want to be able to do. Maybe we want to be able to load perhaps some styling libraries, maybe like Bootstrap or anything, just to start making this look somewhat more presentable. And in here there's a slide on how to do that. You can install Bootstrap very much like we did in React, right? We did an npm install Bootstrap, so let's do that again from the root of your project. Right? This will download the Bootstrap libraries, the very latest one, and we put it under Node, under the Node modules directory. So this will now be under the Node modules, Bootstrap. Should be under here somewhere. There's Bootstrap. Okay. Yes.
Can you use it Bootstrap through the CDN?
Yeah, you could do that instead. Sure. Yeah. Actually, that would be preferable. Yeah. If you for development purposes, this is better. But when you're ready to publish it and put it in production, that would be preferable. They point to a CDN instead. Yes. Okay. But in development, it's just more convenient because the IDE can do completion and find things as you type ahead. All right, so we're gonna copy. We're gonna move what we just downloaded. We're gonna download it into the assets folder, source assets. So the source assets folder here, the source assets folder is where you would put stuff that is static, right? Maybe libraries, any maybe jQuery would go under here. Any Bootstrap would go here. Any vendor-specific libraries would go under assets, right? Anything that is not dynamic, right? That you know it's going to be static CSS, static JavaScript, you would put it under assets, right? And then you would just link it from your index page, so to load it from assets. And instead, everything that is dynamic, you would put it under the app directory. Okay, bless you. And then eventually, when you're ready to deploy it on Heroku or anything like that, at the end you would type ng build. Ng build will compile everything. Right, we'll take all your JavaScript. You might have several dozen files of JavaScript. Okay, it'll compile all that. It'll minimize it. It'll uglify it. It'll optimize it and put it under a distribution folder. Right, and that's what gets deployed to Heroku. Right, and typically you would have an automated process that does this. Right, that runs the build script and then deploys that, copies it over onto the remote server. Okay, but we'll do that a little later. Meanwhile, we just installed Bootstrap. Let's now copy. Let's move the Bootstrap distribution folder onto the assets. So let's do that. And now, so we should see now under assets, the distribution folder for Bootstrap is there. So you'll find here Bootstrap CSS, right? The JavaScript is there as well. Once we have that, we can look at the index file. Our index file, this is the entry point of the application. This is notice that that's what's loading our app root. See that? There it is. Right, that's our app root. Okay, we could have also just done just whiteboard here. We could have done whiteboard, right? Not go through the app root. Could have done that too. Is that still loading? Oops. Whiteboard. Did I not declare it? Oh, let me just leave it. Let's load also the Bootstrap library we just loaded. So we can say link. This is a style sheet. This is href. Oops. Href pointing to the assets. Under there we have dist. Under there we have, what do we have? CSS, and then we have there's Bootstrap. Okay? So notice that it's already looking prettier. Under our whiteboard, we might want to put some container, perhaps so do a div here, class. Here you don't have to do class name or things like that, right? Those attributes, those funny attributes, because it's not, it's not being there's no collision between class meaning something in JavaScript and class meaning something in HTML, right? They're separate, right? This is as pure HTML as you can. So this is container fluid, and let's put that in there. Oops. Okay. There we go. So now we have a little bit of a left-hand side border all around. Everybody good? All right. Okay. Excellent. Let's continue. Let's now load a component whose responsibility will be to perhaps browse through the data set. Right, let's look at what that looks like. First, let's look at the data set we have, the data model on Java, and then we'll come back to see what we have.